Hey, welcome everyone to another AZ Rave video. Today, we're going to talk about blood and gore in cinema. Today's video is going to be a little bit different because it was actually submitted by a subscriber. She actually has her own YouTube channel and she's a subscriber here as well. Her YouTube channel is at Video Essay Charlotte. Definitely like and subscribe. Support her channel. She does a lot of 90s and 2000s nostalgia video essays. Check them out. They're very entertaining and you will get a lot from them, I promise. She suggested in the community tab, we had a discussion about blood and gore in cinema. I wanted to address the alienation that gets formed because of people that either like or don't mind gore and violence in films to those that do, right? So the way I'm going to do that is by explaining the symbolism behind the gore and violence, just to make it more purposeful, right? When it's done with purpose, of course. If you're in the movie theater, if you're at home streaming or you're watching a film on your phone, if a film has blood and gore, that probably is going to influence your decision. Should I watch it? Shouldn't I watch it? Those are the different things that may go through your mind. So the way I want to break down this topic is that I want to analyze it on different levels. First, I want to talk about the history of blood and gore in cinema. Give some examples of some directors that use blood and gore in cinema. And then analyze my thoughts and opinions on it and if it's really necessary. So let's get into it, guys. Right now for this part, we just want to discuss a little bit about the history of blood and gore in cinema. Blood and gore can be traced back to the French Grand Guignol Theater, where they thought to have violent and carnage realism for the audience. The first film that depicted gore was D.W. Griffith's Intolerance, which was filmed in 1916, which had decapitation and a person getting pierced in their abdomen. Black and white films didn't have the problem of making the color look authentic for the blood. For example, Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 film, Psycho, used chocolate syrup, as well as George Romero's Night of the Living Dead in 1968 also used chocolate syrup. And then fake blood was created for color films. You have Kensington Gore, former pharmacist, created a substance to make it look like blood, which is a combination of golden syrup, red dye, corn flour, and water. Later on, we have the Hays Code, which made it prohibited for on-screen violence and fake blood until the 1960s. So they had to, reshoot because of all those different restrictions of the time. CGI blood is now used in modern film, and then some people still use on-screen fake blood in cinema. And that's a brief history of blood and gore in cinema. So what I wanted to discuss is how blood and gore is meant to be a symbol, a metaphor. When you see a blood and gore in a film, whether you're seeing blood falling from a protagonist's face or maybe someone's heart being impaled and dying, whether they're the villain of the film, they're all supposed to have a deep significance, a deep metaphor, right? It's supposed to be a turning point, a conflict. It's supposed to signify something when it's done effectively and when it's done well. So there's different ways to film it, right? And this where it becomes complicated, how you film blood and gore, right? Because showing the blood and showing the details of the gore is what can make a viewer feel more grossed out by it, honestly, right? Because in an action film, for example, you can show the hero killing a bad guy and it's just guns, right? And because they're guns, you don't feel the intimacy as well compared to someone getting stabbed, right? There's more intimacy to it. But if you don't show the blood, it kind of does this trick to the audience member that like, oh, okay, what happened there isn't as bad, even if it is bad, right? Even if that person did die. But the blood and gore aspect that it gets revealed kind of can play a role on the realism or how an audience may perceive what they're seeing, right? And that also affects the rating, right? Like in the US, right, we have PG-13 and rated R. 13-year-old can watch it. Rated R is 17 years and plus. I know other countries have different ratings, but either way, how those ratings work is that depending on how blood and gore is depicted affects the ratings, right? And that also limits the audience members that are going to see these films, right? Some people don't care about gore, some people don't. Some people do, right? And it creates those divisions. I know, speaking for myself, I wasn't initially a big blood and gore fan, which may be a contradiction because I'm definitely a big martial art fan. I'm definitely into that a lot. Well, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge martial arts fan. I'm a huge action film fan. I don't mind gore in those movies. That's not what this video is about. It's asking if blood and gore and violence is necessary to the film. Come on. I like blood and gore and violence. Come on. How do you think I got this mustache and beard and this hair on my chest? Come on. I'm not opposed to it. Maybe I shouldn't say I'm a fan of it, but come on. I'm not. No boom, boom, bang, bang, blood scare me. Yeah. Because, come on, there's some action and martial art films that are just done for the sake of just being violent. And that's the whole purpose of them. Yeah, that's not what this video is about. Definitely watch those. Definitely check those out. Yeah. But, yeah, I'm not trying to disparage those films or anything like that. I'm just trying to answer the question, is gore and violence necessary in cinema? And so that brings us back to what I was saying, that blood and gore, can affect the realism and affect the visions in film if you want to see it. I personally wasn't always the biggest fan of blood and gore, but I slowly built up a tolerance to it. In martial art films, especially like samurai films, when you see it, you see blood, you see it very quickly. Sometimes you see it like spew out, but it doesn't dominate the film. Most of the film, I would say 80 to 70% of it is not blood and gore. It's the plot, it's the action, it's the training, it's the protagonist overcoming some kind of conflict, the resolution of it, them improving themselves throughout the journey. That's the bigger part of what's happening in the plot. But then you have some films that just completely get into it. A film, for example, that started to grow my tolerance for blood and gore were the Saw films. I'm personally not a big fan of the Saw films, but as I was growing up, watching movies when I was like a teenager in high school, one of my friends was a big fan, and he always asked me, hey, you want to go watch it with me? And I said sure, because I liked films. And if we're gonna watch a movie, good movie, bad movie, I'm down. I'll watch it. When I first started watching it, oh my goodness, it freaked me out. Especially if you guys have seen the Saw films. I won't really give a spoiler because I think it's pretty well known. If not, well, I guess my bad. But basically, the people that get caught in all of Jigsaw's, the main villain of the film's traps, usually are forced to mutilate themselves. Like their legs get caught up in some kind of chain or something like that, or their arms are chained up, so they're forced to essentially like cut limbs off. And the film is very, very graphic. It shows the person cutting it off. You see the bone, you see the meat, you see the blood, you see the agony, you see the pain. You see the pain. They make it very, very realistic. And of course, that's done on purpose. It is part of an artistic decision for the realism, right? And horror is one of the easiest examples of that, right? It makes you take the villain more seriously once you see the villain does some kind of serious assassination, right? Whether it's decapitating somebody, killing somebody, murdering someone. And if it's done in a gruesome way, it makes the viewer realize, oh, dang, the stakes are real, the stakes are higher, something crazy happened here, right? So that's why it usually happens. And then going back to the earlier mentioned topic of like action films, we'll talk about Rocky. Great film series, great films. That's more of a sports analogy, but because it's boxing, you know, it's violent because it's a martial art. You have two competitors going back and forth. And usually when you see blood, it shows you the severity of the stakes, right? And blood, when it comes to a realistic depiction of pain, blood is quite interesting. It's poetic, actually. Not everyone bleeds the same. As a person that's trained, I know that for a fact. When you train with somebody, some people get cut easily, other people hardly get cut at all. And that kind of shows the stakes, right? Some people bruise easily. Some people, it takes them a whole lot to bruise. So it just depends, right? And that kind of lets you know the stakes, right? But if you're a viewer watching with no kind of martial art experience and no kind of experience hurting or striking someone, you begin to question like the reality of the situation, right? And once you start seeing someone bruising and bleeding, it starts to show you like the severity of the stakes. Another example that shows this is even in like animation films or animes, right? One of the scenes that comes to mind is Porco Rosso, right? You see a scene when they're both, the main character, Porco Rosso, is fighting against his like American counterpart. And they're trying to see who's better, right? And they're literally punching each other back and forth and back and forth. And you're seeing how this battle is pointless. And it's just, it's pride. It's pride. And that's arguably the message of the film, but it's also a good way of conveying that, like, you know, no matter what it takes, I'm not backing out, and they're going back and forth. So it's showing you the severity of the stakes and the fact that they're hurting each other, right? They're leaving permanent damage, right? There's a saying that you hear in people that watch like martial arts, whether that's boxing, kickboxing, MMA, you name it. They say that there's certain fights that never leave you the same again. And that's one of those fights that you can tell in that film, Porco Rosso, that fight would never leave him the same again. There's only so many concussive blows a person can take. So yeah, that's one example. And now we have directors choosing to add blood and gore into their films, right? Some do a good job and some do a bad job. Quentin Tarantino is probably one of the more well-known directors that loves to use blood and gore. He doesn't overuse it, and he generally does a good job. One of the only films, though, that I'm really not a fan of how he does the blood and gore is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I enjoyed the film overall, but the way he does the blood and gore in that movie, in my opinion, it took me out of the film. I don't think it's one of his strongest films because I felt like it had a lot of tonal issues. I felt like the film couldn't decide whether it was a comedy, whether it was an action film. And then the protagonist was done very messy because it's like, who was the main protagonist? Was it Brad Pitt's character? Was it DiCaprio's character? Was it Margot Robbie's character? It felt very all over the place. I did enjoy the film, but the way it went, especially the ending is just like a cartoon. I won't go too much into spoilers, but the ending is just imagine just a very cartoony carnival-like ending of just the hero saving the day, but in the most cartoonish way possible. And that's my problem with it. It felt cartoonish. And it would be one thing if the whole tone of the film was cartoonish, but it wasn't. And I don't know. I didn't enjoy it. And the reason why I'm bringing up that film is not just to pick on it. Like I said, I enjoyed the film, but it's not, as far as his catalog of films are concerned, it's not Tarantino's strongest in my opinion. I think it's one of the lowest. I'd probably give it like a 7.5 or something. It's still a good movie, but it's nowhere near as good as his best films. And so, like, sometimes when a director does a bad job of blood and gore, like, it takes the viewer out of the movie, like, completely. It's like, basically what I'm getting at is, did the blood and gore make that film better? In that case, it didn't. But when a director does a good job, it's like, oh yeah, it elevated it or it raised the stakes. And in that film, I felt like it was just done as like a big FU to the villain of the film. And it could have been done better. It just, I don't know. I like explaining to you guys that Blood and Gore done well. It's supposed to be like, in my opinion, the icing on a cake. It shouldn't be the whole cake. Other films that Tarantino does well, in my opinion, with Blood and Gore would be like the Kill Bill series, right? It's the martial arts scenes are done very well, and the blood and gore are usually shown as a form of finality of when the opponent or adversary gets weakened or destroyed. Another example of gore done well would probably be the new Bottom film that came out. And that film, it's doing it to convey a message, probably a little exaggeratively, of course. Like, it's trying to convey female solidarity. Did it have to have blood and gore and violence? No, but it's supposed to be symbolism with the football scene. I won't get into it. If you haven't seen the movie, check it out. But the football scene is basically a way of providing female solidarity against the quote-unquote status quo, right? So that film did it well. Did it need that much blood and gore? No. Could they tone it down a little bit? Definitely. But I think it was also done in a comedic way. But that film understood what it was doing. It had a comedic tone from the get. So for them using blood and gore in a comedic way, it's fine because the tone of the film was completely established and it was understood. In contrast to my earlier point, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it had various tonal issues. It couldn't figure out what it was, you know? And then another example of this is like the Scary Movies franchise, right? There's spoof films that are supposed to make fun of scary movies, and it uses blood and gore constantly to make fun of horror slasher genres, and it's done on purpose, right? Because you know from the beginning you're watching a comedy, right? Now, for the final point, is it necessary? Is blood and gore necessary to be included in films? Well, the way I want to go about this is I actually want to quote some research paper that I have below about like why people like horror and gore and violence in films. And there's a term that they use that's called recreational fear. I'm going to put the article in the description in case you guys want to get more info about it. I'm really big about leaving you guys resources in case you guys are maybe potentially students and want to research these topics, or just if you want a deeper understanding, or maybe you just want to be a smarty pants. Just kidding. The research is for you guys, get some benefit from it, maybe even use it as a reference for like a research article or something like that, or maybe you just want to read about it just to know more about it. So what this article talks about is recreational fear, and it breaks down how heart rates fluctuate, how when we watch certain levels of like action and violence and gore and horror in films, because arguably it is a traumatic experience, right? But you're building up a tolerance from it, you're getting the adrenaline from it, and as the viewer, you try to get the enjoyment from it, right? Because you know it's not real, but a good film will suck you into its universe. And when you're experiencing this whole idea with gore and violence, you get lost in the world, you get sucked in, and then it kind of brings you back, and then that's when your heart starts to fluctuate and you build up a tolerance. Are you a fan of gore and violence in film? I'm indifferent to it. I think I've just grown accustomed to it. The more and more we see, there's a lot of R-rated and violent films in cinema, so I've kind of just grown used to it, to be honest. So it's just like one of those things that you just kind of grow accustomed to it. So, do I think it's necessary? Not always. Is it overdone a little bit? Sometimes. Will it scare me of a movie? No, just because I'm so used to it. I've seen some pretty gory stuff. So it's, it doesn't freak me out. It doesn't scare me. I don't find it super necessary sometimes, but Sometimes when it's done well, it could even be artistic, right? One of my favorite films is House of Flying Daggers, and one of the final scenes is this big triumphant sword fight in the snow, and you see the blood that's drawn into the snow, and it's almost done like in a painting. That's another example of just violence done well, because it lets you know the severity of the battle, because it's swords, because they're katanas. People could die, but it's done in an artistic way for you to see the duality and the beauty of life and death, and how sometimes the lines become much closer than we realize in instances in our lives, and that's definitely one of them. And then snow looks great in every movie, right? So, right, the reason why we may have gore and violence in cinema is probably partially due through recreational fear. Some people enjoy it. Some people, it grosses us out. Of course it does, right? Is it necessary in film? I would say it's not necessary. But why do we still have it in film? I think it's definitely a cultural thing. I think it's a generational thing. There's times when people want to see more comedies in theaters, family movies. There's other times when we just want to see an action movie. We want to see a patriotic movie. We want to see a movie that just like makes us feel good. We want some fantasy epic film that's going to make us escape and forget whatever's happening and whatnot, right? So I think it just all depends. So, and it seems like right now, in the aughts, in the 2000s, and right now in the 2020s, we want to see a lot of violent films for some reason, or there's a big viewership for it, you know? Because I think it has to do because we're so desensitized, because of all the social media, because of all the various apps and the internet we see, all the war we've grown up and kind of accustomed to it. Sometimes we need to see blood and gore to wake us up, to get the message. Sometimes directors don't like to give you the message of a film directly. They want the audience to figure it out, right? Sometimes you have like surrealist, poetic, almost painting directors like David Lynch that want you to kind of figure out the hidden meanings of the films, right? So sometimes they expect a little more from the audience member, and sometimes blood and gore can be used in that way to depict a message, right? And it seems like right now, because I feel we're on the brink of some kind of revolution, a change, you know, I think that's why violence is kind of prevalent in the movie theaters. And then just to reiterate Charlotte's question about how many people get secluded by having blood and gore in film, right? I would argue a lot of the audience. Of course, you're going to attract way more people if your film doesn't have blood and gore in it. But I think that's kind of part of the initiation, right? Whoever wants to watch the film, it's like a select few, right? And you become a part of this little community of people that are willing to watch it. And then it can become almost like a phenomenon, right? You can see like different films and franchises that kind of blew up for those reasons, right? Like The Exorcist was a film that became a cult phenomenon because people wanted to see if they could survive the scariness of it, right? And then Jaws was a similar thing, Jurassic Park, right? There are all these like big films that like, because of the shock value, they just, you know, they made the viewers react like, oh my goodness, right? And yeah. So yes, it's gonna, of course, seclude people to it. The question is, should you, the viewer, become open to blood and gore? There's definitely a way to do it. You know, I wouldn't make you watch anything you don't want to watch, but I would say yes, be open to it. And if you want some recommendations, feel free to comment below. Feel free to talk to me via the community tabs. I'm always willing to respond to you guys. I check out the comments all the time. If you want some suggestions like, hey, I'm just getting into gore and violence, or I'm open to it, what are some films you'd recommend? I'd recommend you some tasteful films, so to not throw you to the deep end, so you can start possibly building up some kind of tolerance for it. But if you don't want to ever get into that type of film, then don't. It's your prerogative. Do as you please. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this deep dive on a topic like gore and violence. There's definitely a lot to it. There's definitely a big metaphor for it. I really enjoyed doing this. I'm going to do a lot more deeper dives on various topics of this. That way, so we can expand on the portfolio on this channel. Because I don't want to just do film essays. I want to hit different topics. So yeah, hopefully you guys like this. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And thank you for watching another AZ Ray video. Have a great day, guys.